Welcome to Web Development Lesson 3.8. In this video, we're going to cover the various errors that you can have in a JavaScript function. And again, trust me, even the most professional programmers will make errors in your program. Before we launch into an example, let's review what the different types of errors are. So errors typically will fall into three categories: syntax, runtime, and logical. Syntax errors are physical errors in how the language was written. Think of it as, writing the word cat with a K instead of a C, or forgetting to put a period at the end of a sentence. Those are physical mistakes in how something is written. These are probably the easiest to catch because the browser will give us some feedback as to these syntax errors. Runtime errors are kind of like what the name implies. These are errors that happen as the program is running. So our program might run under most circumstances, but there might be something that we didn't think of that then causes our program to crash. The last type of error is a logical one. These are the toughest ones because it's not a syntax error, so everything we've written is correct in terms of the language, and it's not a runtime error because, again, it does produce some output. But the problem stems from the fact that the output that we're getting is incorrect. So again, those require a little more experience and a little tenacity to figure out those logical mistakes. So now let's go through an example that helps us to explore these different types of errors. So in this Replit example, what we're trying to do is we're trying to take the average of 3 grades. So we've created our user interface with 3 text inputs, a button, and a div. In our JavaScript file, we have some code. So again, at this point, you have to envision, okay, we've written a lot of stuff. We're ready to start testing our program out. So we're going to hit run. And everything's good. This is the console window. It's going to be very useful to us. And let's enter in some grades. So let's say 100, 90, and 80. So the average should be 90. Let's see what we get. All right, so the first thing we're given is that we have an error. Average is not defined. And what you can see here is that they'll give you a line number. So 30 is the line number. 66 is the column number. So let's look at line 30. Right here. And again, I'm not going to count it out, but this is column 66. So it says it can't find average. So let's look at our JavaScript. So that's the intent here, that this was supposed to be an event handler, a function that we create. So we go over here, we notice that the function name is not average, but AVG. This is an example of a runtime error. Because again, the program was correct in the terms of the physical writing of the code, but it didn't work when we actually tried to run it. That's a runtime error. Again, some people might think of this as a syntax error, but it's not because there's nothing wrong with the word average. It's just the fact that there was no average function. It was called AVG. All right, so let's run it again. And you're going to notice we're going to be doing a lot of running of the program and a lot of fixing. Okay, so we got past that error. Now we have another one. And you'll see here that it's actually telling us what JavaScript file to look at. So look at the script.js, line 2. And if you take a quicker look, it says there's an issue with this. Well, the problem was that we spelled document wrong. This is an example of a syntax error, something that was physically wrong in our language. All right, so let's fix that up. And let's run it again. $90 and $80. Okay. We got another type of error. Now, this one is, again, this is a runtime error because as we were going through the error was produced when we tried to run it. There is nothing physically wrong with what we wrote here, except for the fact that it doesn't like this. All right, so again, there's nothing physically wrong with line 5. So now we have to kind of trace our steps back. So this is one of the techniques you can use when you're troubleshooting your program, is to kind of look where the variables are coming from, where the information is coming from. So document get element by ID. Well, that's from the HTML. And you'll notice that the HTML, the div that we're using for our output is not called output, it was called average output. So let's change it up here. And let's run it again. And again, that was an example of a runtime error. Okay, so we don't have any errors in the console. We got some output, but it's not what we were expecting. So this is an example of a logical error. So for this, again, this is where I'm saying it's kind of tough. You have to kind of think about where could the error stem from. So I would suggest always go to the source of what ultimately displayed this. So if we go to our line 9, you'll notice that the logical error is that I use single apostrophes instead of the backtick, which is what's used for string interpolation in JavaScript. So let's give it another try. Again, that was a logical error. And again, some people might think, oh, well, it's because you misspelled the apostrophe. That is true. That was the source of the logical error. But remember, syntax errors are something that's physically incorrect in how you wrote the language. In terms of line 9, the browser doesn't know that I wanted to use the backtick instead of the single apostrophe. Single apostrophes are a legitimate character to have as part of output. So again, that's the reason it's a logical mistake and not a syntax error. All right, so let's give it another try. All right, good. It's still a logical error here because as you can see, it's not giving us the output, but at the same time, it's not displaying this. So something else is happening. So at this point, we have to investigate this A. And where's the A coming from? Well, the A is coming from this calculation. Well, we could do this. Let's do a console.log of A, which is going to display the value of A. So this is one of the techniques you can use when troubleshooting a program, is to simply start displaying the information that's stored inside your variables. And sure enough, we get the same response back because, again, the string interpolation is just simply displaying the A. So let's display something else. Let's display G1. Again, because A is based off of G1, G2, G3, so let's kind of go through the variables individually just to see what's happening there. Okay, so we can see that NaN is still being displayed for G1, so it's not possible for us to do mathematical operations if the value, the information inside of G1 itself isn't the information we want. Now, to kind of go a little quicker through it, we could kind of see line 2, and this is something that in an earlier video, I kind of emphasized the fact that when you work with text inputs, always remember you're working with the value, not the whole thing. So again, I'm not going to go through here, and honestly what I would have done if I wasn't sure, I would have started breaking this line down in pieces, kind of doing the same thing with the console log. And then I would have realized that I was getting the whole text input and not its value. All right, so let's go ahead and fix that up for all 3 of them. Let's run it one more time. Ooh, okay, so we got another error here. Line 3, period. Okay, now that's a syntax error. Matter of fact, it says it right there in the console. So again, something physically wrong, I left out the period. So let's run it again. And just as a confession, that mistake was actually not scripted into this video. That was an honest mistake. So again, just to show you, errors do happen, even for the most seasoned programmer. All right, so let's go through this, and now we see we have an error on line 3. Now, again, it's not a syntax error because there's nothing physically wrong with how the language is written, but it's still not giving us what we want. So we got to trace this back the same way we did the output, and let's see, do we have a G2? And as you can see here, for grade 2, we actually do not have G2, we had G1. Again, this is a common mistake when you start doing a lot of copy and pasting of HTML, and honestly JavaScript as well, that you fail to update the copied information with the new information. So let's go back to the script.js, let's run this again. And hopefully we get a little closer. All right, so very good. So we're getting a number. It's not the number we're expecting, which means this is yet another logical error. Now, because this program's so small, the logical errors aren't so hard to spot. Obviously, it's something wrong with our calculation, and that's because we're not forcing the summation of the 3 grades first before I divide by 3. We can solve that problem by simply putting parentheses around the grades to make the grades add up first before we divide by 3. All right, so hopefully this is the last iteration of us running the program. And there we go. All right, so we have an average. The average is 90. So let's go back to our presentation and review a little bit of what we've explored. So in this video, we saw how our programs can consist of errors. It's almost inevitable. At some point in your programming journey, you will produce errors in your program. And those errors will typically fall into one of 3 categories, which are syntax errors, physical mistakes in the way the language is written, runtime errors, some kind of calculation or something that was tried to that you tried to access that doesn't exist, or logical errors, where your program runs, but it just doesn't give you the output that you were expecting. There are several techniques that you can use to assist you with this, and one great tool is the console. The console lets you display information when an error happens, and also lets you display information from within your program so you can investigate what these values are and possibly determine the source of the error. So have a lot of patience. Errors are very frustrating, but the more you program, the better you'll get. Enjoy.